When it comes to New York City school systems, it's easy for officials to assume what problems its students are facing. But students have the opportunity to talk about their experiences at Whom It Should Concern event at the Brooklyn Public Library. Now, joining us now to talk a little bit more about the event, we welcome now the editor of the Bell podcast, Taylor McGraw, and high school student Haby Sondo, right? Sondo. Okay, yeah. Good to have you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And so when we talk about public schools, obviously a lot of challenges for students, but you guys tackle front and center the issue of inequity. Mm-hmm. Give us a little bit about this here.
Well, when you were talking earlier about Andrew Cuomo adding this free tuition for families making under $100,000 in the new budget, I thought to myself, that's wonderful, but the city's school system is actually doing a really poor job of preparing students for college, and there are really tremendous inequities across racial and socioeconomic classes in terms of who's prepared and who's not.
And so when we look at the inequity that's going on in schools today, what exactly what are you finding?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, most people don't realize this, but New York State is now the most segregated public school system in the nation. And New York City, as a large part of that is because of New York City. And it's not just segregated in terms of race and class, it's segregated in terms of school quality. Mm-hmm. And so in the Bronx, for example, if you look at the students' pass rates on the recent ELA state tests, in no district in the Bronx did more than 30% of students pass. In zero of the districts, right? And meanwhile, in parts of Manhattan, parts of Brooklyn, students are passing at 70, 80%. And so there's just a tremendous gap.
Mm-hmm. And Haby, talk to us, because now you've got some students who are taking charge, and you're one of them, and talk about the student-led movement.
Okay, so To Whom It Should Concern is basically like an event that's taking place at the Bronx Public Library. Where is that again?
It's nearby, right?
Right.
Yeah.
The Bronx Library.
So basically, we created our title called Teens Take Charge. It's basically like an alliance of students all across like different high schools in New York different high schools in New York City. Mm-hmm. Basically, just forming together to speak on issues that we're finding in our education systems and comparing our different experiences to like bring a voice to our stories.
And when you talk about bringing a voice, how important is that voice? I mean, obviously you've got officials, you've got adults, but when you have students giving a voice.
Yeah, exactly. And what I've found as a journalist is that the voices of the politicians and the school and community leaders are the ones who are driving the conversation. And it's very rare that we actually hear from the students who are impacted by the policies that are being created by those folks. Mm-hmm. And so we think that it's going to be really powerful, and it'll hopefully spark a more urgent dialogue about the inequities that exist.
I want to take a look at some stats that I have. It says with more than 1,800 schools and 1.1 million students, New York City public school system is the nation's largest, and it's also one of the most segregated by race and class. 1/3 of the students have enrollments that are at least 95% Black or Hispanic, and nearly a quarter of students attend schools at which 100% of the kids qualify for free or reduced price lunch, and that's an indicator of economic need.
Yeah, exactly.
So when you look at that and you say, gosh, these numbers are out there and they're startling, how do we turn the handle, and how do we do this now? Because there's a conversation that's obviously being had by students, but what more can we be doing, and what more kind of action would you like to see?
Well, I mean, I think first and foremost, people need to be aware that this is happening. I think if you poll New Yorkers, public education doesn't rank among the problems in their community, but it should. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's the first thing. But beyond that, we've got to take charge. The teens take charge, and actually, write to politicians, show up at events like the one that we're hosting, because if people start to speak out and protest, then I think we're going to get some policies that reflect that.
Haby, what do you want people to take away from the event when they come and they leave? What do you want them to be able to do?
I guess I want people to be able to hear that our voices matter in the discussion of educational inequity. As Taylor said, too often our voices are left unheard when these different legislations and reforms are being made in terms of our education, and we're the ones in the system and being directly impacted by it. So I've went to I went to elementary school and middle school in the South Bronx, and it's honestly like in terms of the students, the experience was great, but like the education that I've received wasn't always the best. Like in middle school, there was a lack of resources such as a library, or there were very little computers. There was like one computer that like everybody like in the school shared, so we didn't really have access to resources like that. In terms of like standardized testing, like we were like heavily like geared towards like focusing on exams. Like in elementary school, like as early as elementary school, we took like New York State exams for like 3 days, and it's like very like, you have to do this, you have to get this right, you have to pass this, and then like that continues on when you get to high school. In terms of like Regents exams, like if you don't pass certain Regents exams, like you're unable to pass, and like through statistics, like even like through like students, like those exams are not an actual like reflection of our intellectual capability. So I guess I want people to know that.
So Teens Take Charge
Yeah.
is definitely going to be out front and leading the charge, taking place at the public library, and certainly as the public library will be the site for this gathering, people have the opportunity to come. What goes on after the event? Because I know the work still continues and the voices are still trying to be raised.
Well, so there's 92 public library branches in the Bronx, Manhattan, I think Staten Island. And they basically said we can do this anywhere you guys want. And so this is going to be the first event, but we're hoping to make it a traveling series so that this work continues and it grows and grows and gets bigger each time.
And certainly there's a lot, you're right, there are a lot of public libraries around the city. So listen, the event is called Teens Take Charge is a student-led coalition, and they're committed to making that happen. And so Taylor McGraw is editor of The Bell, and how long have you been following this?
I've been teaching in New York City for 5 years, and in the last year or so I started this podcast.
And so when people want to catch the podcast, what do they do?
Go to bellpodcast.com. We're going to be on iTunes. So.
Okay, well, good for you. Haby, thank you so much for coming and sharing with us. And of course, we will see that hopefully the public will come out and hear what you guys have to say. All righty, thank you guys both. And guess what? We're taking a break. Coming back with more Open. Stay with us. We're coming right back right after this.